Chapter 15. Scene 1. LGBTQ stuff. Getting ready for bed, Bethany realized she was becoming even more distant, more aloof, more suspicious, more protective. The more she had read from the archives, the less she was the Bethany others had known. She had been drawn into places which had been forbidden. She had been conditioned to run from them, but she began delving deeper. She would struggle, question, and resolve. But there was one which constantly simmered under the surface while, at the same time, looming over her. As Naomi had cautioned herself to do, she initially knocked softly on Bethany's door and waited. There was no answer. She knocked more forcefully, and there was still no answer. She turned the doorknob. It was unlocked. She peeked in. Bethany was sitting on the edge of the bed. With an intensely furrowed brow, Bethany was staring at her clenched hands. Without looking at Naomi, Bethany asked, "What did you think about Pastor Habsburg's sermon?" "Which part?" she asked as she sat next to her. "The homosexuality and the other stuff." "You mean the LGBTQ stuff?" "Yeah." Surprised, Naomi challenged her. "Don't you agree with what he said?" No, that's not it." "Then what?" Naomi asked suspiciously. His disgust was so intense. It was as if he hated them. And it wasn't just him, it was everybody. "I heard so many hateful things. It was so mean, so unchristian." Naomi harshly responded, "It is not. Homosexuality is. Being gay or queer or any of those other things is unchristian. Pastor Habsburg told us what the Bible says. Leviticus makes it clear. If a man lies with a male as with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them." And he said it is the same for women. Reciting the precise quote was a tribute to Naomi's constant Bible study, and it was not too unexpected, especially since she had recently heard the passage. Certain passages stuck with her. It is a sin, and you can't expect people, good Christian people, to react any other way. After all, as Pastor Habsburg said, in the past, when the country was called the United States of America, people were expected to tolerate that stuff, and it doomed the country. Those kinds of people spread their sins and their diseases and destroyed many lives. They pulled young people into a life of sin. But there was so much hate, so much hate. I don't want to feel like I should hate someone. I don't want to hate anyone. It feels awful. It makes me ill. Not once had Bethany looked at Naomi or even lifted her head. As Naomi's deep concern spread across her face, she softened. She put her hand on Bethany's and squeezed it gently. "Bethany, I love you dearly, more than anything. I hate to see you like this." Bethany gazed lovingly into Naomi's eyes. "I can't lose her. She's part of me." They had been closer than real sisters, closer than twins since they were 4. But the distance between them was growing, and Bethany didn't know how to stop it, other than staying away from the archives in her search for the truth. "Please, you got to snap out of this. Everybody thinks something is wrong with you. I want to help, but I don't know what to do." Naomi added her other hand and gently caressed Bethany's. Bethany turned her head toward Naomi. Tears were wandering down her cheeks. Naomi wiped a tear away, catching it on her finger. "I don't want you to feel like this. I love you so much. You're the best friend I'll ever have, and I don't want to lose you." Bethany slid off the edge of the bed and onto the floor and sobbed. "I can't do this anymore," she said, shaking her head slowly from side to side. Naomi sat next to her, putting her arm around her shoulders. "Do what? Pretend? What are you pretending?" Bethany momentarily peered into Naomi's eyes, then guiltily turned away. "Everything. I don't understand. What are you talking about? Things are not right. No one will tell the truth. They've been lying. They're always lying. I've been lying. We're all lying. About what? Everything. I want to help, but you're not making any sense." Bethany sniffled, wiped her cheeks with her index finger, and shook her head. She desperately wanted to tell Naomi. She needed to tell someone, but she knew what the results would be. Deviation from the tale of the evangelical Christian founding would be treated harshly, and not just for her. The family was seen as an inseparable unit, and the damage to the family would be immense, especially to a high-ranking official like her father. So Bethany would swallow her sorrow, her agony, and pretend as best she could. With another sniffle, Bethany said, "Everything is okay." "How can you say that? I'm going to be fine. It's just hormones." "I don't believe you. Thank you for caring about me. But you'll see. Everything will be fine. I was just a little on edge. I just needed to vent a little. I might have caught a bug or something. Anyway, I need to get some rest." I haven't. To say she hadn't been sleeping well would just open up another concern for Naomi to dig into. As Bethany rose, Naomi's arm slid from her shoulder. Naomi turned her head and watched Bethany slide into bed and pull the covers back. Naomi stood while Bethany got under the covers. Naomi tucked the covers in, taking Bethany's hand. They both squeezed, and Naomi left, both worried, one frightened. Bethany had come too close to exposing her secret. Her need to tell someone would make her more vulnerable. She would have to add another layer of steely resistance, broaden the distance from everyone, especially Naomi. She would need to put on a better act to protect herself. She rolled on her side, pulled the covers tight, and closed her eyes. Scene 2. Archives and LGBTQ. It was 6 Saturday morning when Bethany walked into the kitchen, filled the only empty pocket of her backpack with food, left a hiking note, slipped quietly out the back door, and softly latched the gate behind her. The archives were waiting for her, and she hoped it could ease her mind, as had happened several times with Pastor Habsburg's hellfire and damnation sermons. The congregation and then Naomi's hostile reaction had distressed Bethany. However, still antagonizing Bethany even more was Habsburg's sermon from last Sunday. Posted on the board behind him had been Leviticus 20 verse 13. Repeating over in Bethany's thoughts was a line from it. "They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them." Pastor Habsburg had told the congregation that the passage was about the most sinful, hideous kind of sexual act. Bethany didn't know what the actual act was. It was deemed evil and disgusting and was punishable by death. It would be their own fault. Even normal sex was a topic about which nothing would be taught or discussed. Whatever she knew had been whispered in small groups who were relying on conversations overheard between teenagers with little knowledge and no experience, even though they professed they did. Their science of sex had been derived from tales told about conquests under the bleachers and behind the school on a dark night with phantom females that no one seemed to know except the conquering storyteller. Where was the line that couldn't be crossed? Was it in her mind or in the act? What was the act? Bethany had always been around girls, largely due to school and the separation of sexes at church. She was comfortable with girls and very uncomfortable with boys. Hugging a girl seemed natural. She and Naomi had hugged often when they were young and even slept together and sometimes unconsciously would hug each other as they slept. It was comforting to hold someone, especially a best friend. It felt protective. It had been more than a year since they had shared a bed. One summer night, before they started the 7th grade, Bethany came to Naomi's room for their usual Friday night sleepover. The door was locked. It had never been before. Bethany knocked softly. There was no answer. She knocked harder, still no answer. She knocked still harder. "Naomi, I can't open your door, it's locked." No response. Another knock, and several more went unanswered. Bethany went to her room, trying to figure out what she had done wrong. In her mind, her sister and best friend didn't want to see her. The next morning, Bethany asked, "Are you angry with me?" "No." "Did I do something to upset you?" "No." "What?" "You locked your door, and it was your turn for a sleepover." "I was asleep. I could hear you messing around in your room." "Well, I just didn't hear you. You had to have heard me." "Well, I didn't." "Yes, you did." "No, I didn't." "I don't believe you." "I don't care." "If you don't like it, then we just won't have the sleepover thing anymore." "Why?" "We're too old for that. We had one with our friends 2 weeks ago." "Yes, but that was with a bunch of girls, not just each other. And not in the same bed and not hugging." "So you think it is wrong?" "Yes, I do, and I'll bet Mother does too." "Okay, I am sorry. I won't bother you anymore." "Bethany, that's not it. I just don't want to do it anymore. I don't like it. I don't feel comfortable." "Okay." Bethany, fighting the rejection, sunk into herself, returned to her room, and went into the bathroom. She looked in the mirror. Her eyes drooped. Her skin had an ashen hue. Her legs wobbled. She pulled a washcloth off the rack, wet with cold water, and pressed it against her eyes. She let the tears go. By the end of summer, Naomi had repaired much of the damage, and Bethany had done what she had always done, adjusted to make everyone happy. She detested hostility. The next Saturday, as she hiked toward the archives, Bethany could hear Habsburg's sermon carried on the wind, rustling harshly through the leaves. Women laying with women and men laying with men was the scourge of civilization and responsible for much of God's wrath. If she lay with a girl, it was wrong, sinful, evil, worthy of God's wrath, and worthy of death. But Bethany, try as she might, couldn't feel that way. And with her vision of Christ, she couldn't think he would feel that way. Where were his teachings and love, forgiveness and compassion? She believed in them. They touched a part of her that felt right, genuinely part of being human. The other felt like revenge, retribution, a betrayal of Christ's love. It was hate, and she didn't see that as Christ's message. More and more, it seemed like evangelical Christians saw themselves as the executioners of God's wrath, not as the deliverers of Christ's love. Absorbed in thought, she had walked several paces past the hatch to the archives before she realized it. She turned and returned. She lifted the hatch, which was turning brown from the dying roots and leaves. She reminded herself to pull fresh leafy vines over the top before she left. She spent 3 hours searching through the articles in the Chronicles for something about homosexuality, gays, queers, or LGBTQ. What she found surprised her. She expected less hostility. She found several editorials from Pastor Duncan, the head of the local Christian church, demonizing LGBTQ. The same derogatory words were used to describe the group. After combing through the papers, she found only one response to the editorial. It decried the intolerance, vicious hatred, and violence. It told of the vandalism of a student's locker, broken windows of a house, and spray-painted obscenities on the garage door. Above the front door, painted in large black letters, was "Beware the Wrath of God, Belial." And then the article told of a high school student who was harassed, bullied, and finally found behind the school severely beaten. No action was taken by the school. Then the anonymous author asked 5 questions. How did the boy harm you? Why did you feel threatened? What were you afraid of? In what way did what he was change your life? Are you a Christian, or are you an emissary of hate, the hallmark of Satan? The harassment had become so intense that the family, who had lived for 3 generations in the town, had to leave. His final question was, what does that say about what kind of people live in this professed friendly town? The hate and violence the family had endured settled hard in Bethany. She saw the boy behind the school. She saw the fear in his eyes as he was cornered. She heard the degrading insults, saw each blow that followed and the blood flowing from the broken skin. She saw the unrestrained satanic hate in the eyes of the attackers. She saw the boy who had done no harm laying on the ground, bloodied, broken, and deserted. She saw the attackers walking away, self-righteously proud and laughing. They had executed God's wrath. She would never know the terror the boy felt. The thought alone shuddered her. That anyone would do this outraged her. That Pastor Habsburg had not condemned violence, but rather spoke of the righteous wrath of God as their punishment, and man, as the punisher, thrust a faith-crushing weight on her belief in her church's views. Bethany wondered if she knew a non-heterosexual person. Was there a way to tell? What are the signs? Are there any signs? Could she be gay or something other than what the church would accept and not know it? If she was something other than straight, was it her fault, a weakness of spirit, an evil deformity, a demon in her soul, or was she just defective? Had she chosen it? She didn't know how she would know that she was gay. Would she just feel it one day and know? She didn't feel gay or straight or anything other than what she was, whatever that was called. She didn't have a name for what she was because she didn't feel anything other than Bethany. That's all she knew. She was Bethany. What she had heard from Pastor Habsburg's sermon and the comments during and after his sermon was not the compassion and tolerance that she wanted living in her heart. Only with compassion and tolerance in her heart did she feel worthy and did life feel fulfilling. She no longer had that feeling. Why is this happening to me? Is there something wrong with me? After she shut the hatch, she pulled vines over it. She whispered, Jenkins Corners. She felt less reverence for the small town. If the Chronicle's articles were an accurate snapshot of their world, she had discovered that the pain, rejection, cruelty, and intolerance that some people had endured over 200 years ago, they were still suffering. As she hiked home, she thought, maybe Pastor Habsburg was right. Not being attracted only to the opposite sex was unnatural, inherently evil, and deserving of the wrath of God and death. She tried to shake the thought out of her head. It stayed. Scene 3. Exam questions. Naomi woke Wednesday morning and rushed into Bethany's room. I am scared. It's about the history final exam, isn't it? Of course. What else would it be? Well, we've been studying for it for weeks and weeks. We're ready. You always say that, and you always do well. You do well too. You don't freak out, but I do. You know this stuff. But what if I freeze or my mind goes blank? It didn't go blank on the pre-test, did it? No, but this is the real test. Quietly hum a tune you like until you relax. Then go back to the test. Imagine you're listening to Mrs. Sanderson and copy what she's saying. If you start getting real tense and nothing is working, dig your fingernails into your palms until it's really painful and then release. I've heard that helps people relax. Really, I don't know if that is actually true. So stop before you start to bleed. Bethany smiled. You're going to be fine. I know you will. Naomi hugged Bethany and hurried to her room. As the limousine pulled in front of the school, Bethany pulled on the door handle and pushed. Naomi grabbed her hand. Bethany turned and wrapped an arm around her. They tried to smile reassuringly, but it fell awkwardly, as did the walk to the classroom. Mrs. Sanderson approached the front of the class with a stack of papers cradled in her arms, as if they were a precious newborn. She cleared her throat. The exam covers Anton Haig's The Struggle in my lectures. I hope you're all ready. You should be, especially after the pre-exam, on which some of you, too many, did not fare well. You have 2 hours to complete the exam. Write legibly. Spelling counts, especially names of places and people. Do not scribble through words or comments you wish to remove or correct. Draw a single line through them. If you do not have enough space for your answer, finish it on the back and make sure you number it correctly. As she walked to the head of each row, she said, take one and pass it back. Naomi and Bethany, who were sitting next to each other, reached across the row and squeezed each other's hand. Mrs. Sanderson saw the exchange and smiled. As Bethany started the exam, she had 2 answers in her mind, the United Christian States of America answer and the Jenkins Corners Archive answer. While she would write about one, she would know a truer answer would be in another. Section A of the exam covered the Great Demonstration. As she worked through the questions about the Great Demonstration, a battle with the Jenkins Corners Chronicles reporting on the event raged in her mind. She knew the embellished stories Mrs. Sanderson told about the evangelical Christian recounting of the event, and she knew which answers were supposed to go on the exam, so that's what went on the exam. However, she had read a series of articles in the Jenkins Corners Chronicles written at the time of the demonstration and deadly, violent protest. Some 85 years later, they would start being called the Great Demonstration and the Great Conflagration by evangelical Christian history. However, after listening to Mrs. Sanderson recounting of the events, Bethany, on one of her visits to the archives, searched for articles of the same events. There was a drastic difference. The federal government had not initiated the investigation into the use of the funds. A group of Jenkins Corners citizens had brought a suit against the mayor and the city council. The Great Demonstration did start on July 23, 2030, and a United States federal judge did rule that local and federal tax funds could not be used for religious purposes. The government ordered that the money be repaid. The city refused. The government sent a negotiator, Martha Iglesias, to work out a plan to reimburse the government. There were no demonstrators when Martha Iglesias arrived in a government car at the appointed time, 8 p.m., to meet with the Mayor Maddox and the city council. They couldn't come to an agreement. There was no reporting that Iglesias threatened to replace Mayor Maddox or attempted to take over the running of the city. When Iglesias left the Jenkins Corners Community Center, a crowd of approximately 200 townspeople were waiting outside. Random shouts of shame, freedom, leave turned into a chant of tyrant. Martha Iglesias was surrounded by the chanting crowd. She was jostled a few times before Mayor Maddox, and a few council members escorted her to her car. A picture of Mayor Maddox, standing next to a sign in front of the community center, showed no silver handle cane. Behind the sign was the community center. The center was not a low, sweeping, bland, gray concrete structure. It was a wooden two-story converted house with meeting rooms on the first floor and offices of the town's part-time officials located on the second floor. Across the street was a small park. Parking for the center was at the curb in front of the house. As Bethany began the great conflagration portion of the test, she saw only one conflict with Mrs. Sanderson's version of the story. There were no reports or articles in the Jenkins Corners Chronicles about the great conflagration. There were no reports of a rape or a deadly clash. There was no indication that military troops had ever been in the town. When she first tried to find articles about the rape and the violent confrontation, she had found nothing. She checked the death records. Only 2 elderly people had died during that time. She determined that the great conflagration had been a complete fabrication. Still, Bethany answered the questions as if the evangelical version were a historically accurate event. For the remainder of the exam, she put the Jenkins Corners Chronicles on the shelf, shut the door to the archives, and finished the test, pretending that the alternate history was a quaint myth about which she was writing. Scene 4. The newspaper dies. Bethany was not as excited as she had been about her return to the archives, but she was determined to understand what had happened to Jenkins Corners and hopefully retrieve her faith in humanity, which was waning. Her steps were heavy, and her eyes focused largely on the ground. She noticed no singing birds, no forest smells, no rustle of creatures scurrying through the undergrowth. Her path was as direct as her mind was focused on what had happened to Jenkins Corners. As usual, she turned on her lamp as she opened the door to the archives. She would perform a more extensive search of the archives, tracing the change over a span of 30 years after the period of the Great Demonstration and Phantom Great Conflagration. She discovered that the Jenkins Corners Chronicles reported that town meetings had become very contentious. At the meetings, hostility between the evangelical Christians and the small number of non-evangelical citizens increased. Bethany went from shelf to shelf searching for some indication about what had happened. What she noticed was the newspaper getting thinner and the dimensions getting smaller. She was sifting through the papers from 2053 when the October 25th edition's banner headline, in large bold type, read Lord's Bounty Incorporated. The article explained that a new housing tract would be finished by the end of summer or fall. A community center would open shortly thereafter. A business district was already under construction. The first building to be completed would be an evangelical Christian church. All evangelical Christians will be welcome to live in Lord's Bounty and assisted with moving. Financing would be available. By mid-2055, the Jenkins Corners Chronicles was down to a weekly paper with no advertisers. The shelf for 2056 was empty, except for a single one-page paper announcing the closing of the Jenkins Corners Chronicles. There were simply not enough people left in the town to continue the paper, and Lord's Bounty already had their own. The Chronicles had been insolvent for a year and was surviving on the love of the owner and his wife, now the sole employees. Their 2 reporters had been born again and were now working for Lord's Bounty. Bethany neatly replaced everything, walked down the aisle toward the entrance, stopped, and turned back. She stared at the shelves, disappointed and frustrated. She slowly ascended the steps, closed and latched the door, pushed the hatch open and let it fall behind her with a crunch. She gazed deeper into the dark woods. Maybe, the woods were populated with dense thickets and a tightly packed variety of trees. The hatch had been a stumbling find. There had been nothing left of the library above ground, and there appeared to be nothing around it. However, there had been a town large enough to have a library, assuming the archives were part of a library and not just the basement of a building or a converted bomb or survival shelter. She gazed as far into the dark as she could. Next Saturday. Scene 5. Test results. Mrs. Sanderson had finished grading the exams by Tuesday of the following week and, as usual, posted the results on the corkboard outside the classroom. Bethany's name was not on the list. Bethany wondered if, in her haste and anxiety, she had written a portion of the truth. having intently read the Jenkins Corners Chronicles and so deeply believed them? Had she subconsciously converted the required responses into an accurate one? Knowing that she might have written the truth did not assuage her fear. What would happen? What kind of ridicule and punishment would she be subjected to? Would she be sent to the rehabilitation camp, where she would be born again and again until she was convinced of the error of her ways? Would she reveal where the archives were? Ultimately, would she be taken to the zone of the damned and released as if she were a rabid animal? Not knowing if she had the courage, she told herself, "Take your stand here and now. Tell the class what you discovered. Tell them the different history." She took a deep breath and, while shaking, proudly walked into the room and sat in her chair. Naomi leaned toward her. "Why wasn't your name on the list?" "I don't know, but I'm sure I'll soon find out." To stop her hands from shaking, she entwined her fingers and set her hands on her desk. She waited as Mrs. Sanderson walked around the room, blandly handing back the tests. When she got to Bethany, she glanced at her and continued. Naomi reached across the aisle and touched Bethany's arm. Naomi looked at her. "Where's your test? What's going on?" Bethany shook her head. Mrs. Sanderson went over the test. Bethany thought, "Is she just trying to increase my agony? What was that look she gave me? Was someone going to show up and drag me from the room? Am I going to rehabilitation camp?" She felt lightheaded. "Bethany, please stand up and come to the front of the room." Putting her hands on her desk to steady herself, Bethany stood and walked up the aisle, thinking she might collapse at any second. She knew she didn't have the courage to tell the truth. She had been trained to succumb to pressure. After all, she was just a girl, just a female, and females had a place in the evangelical Christian world, and it wasn't at the front of a room correcting possible deceptive and manipulative history. With wobbling legs, she made it to the front of the room and stood beside Mrs. Sanderson. Bethany has had a tough year. It's been hard for her to listen to some of the evangelical Christian history. Bethany reassessed. Maybe this won't be too bad. Maybe just a reprimand. But she came out with flying colors at the end. She received the highest grade I have ever given for the final exam. Ever. Congratulations, dear. You are a remarkable student. You know what you believe, and you firmly believe it. You should be proud of yourself, but not too proud. It can become a sin. Be proud in the name of Christ and thank Him. Mrs. Sanderson handed Bethany's test to her. "I want this test back." Not knowing her own emotions, Bethany walked back to her desk. Some students congratulated her. Some students had no reaction. A few glared. They were the same ones who spent too many times glaring at her. As she sat, Mrs. Sanderson said, "You should consider teaching in your future." Naomi stood and hugged her. "Great job, sister. I can't wait to tell Mom and Dad. They'll be so proud." "Thanks." They both sat. "Please don't make a big deal out of this. I'd rather you not say anything." "Why not? It's just a test. The best test ever. You should be proud." "Please don't. I'm trying to be humble." "Best test ever?" "Best fabrication ever." Bethany's test answers were an acceptance of fiction. She had lied, and her lies had brought success. Pride, dishonor. "Well, this time I'm not going to let you be humble." "Don't. Please," Bethany pleaded. "There's nothing you can do to stop me." As class ended, envy and jealousy, wrapped in compliments, followed Bethany out of the room and down the hall. She smiled ingenuously and registered each compliment as her hypocrisy. Scene 6. Praise and moral failure. Rita stood at the junction of the stairs, the living room, the dining room, and the entryway. She shouted, "Dinner in 15 minutes." Rita had been told several times several years ago that the new house had an intercom system. She used the buzzer and discovered that one or more members of the family always failed to respond. Rita had a deep, massive voice just short of sounding masculine. Shouting had never failed, especially with a 15-minute warning racked on. At dinner, Ethan led the holding hands prayer. They all punctuated it with amen. Naomi pushed her chair back, walked to Bethany, and stood behind her. Bethany turned her head to Naomi and softly said, "Please don't do this." "Mom, Dad, I have an announcement." She put her hands on Bethany's shoulders and paused. Her parents stared quizzically at the pair. "Okay," Ethan said with Esther following shortly with, "What is it?" Bethany rolled her eyes. Naomi said, "Sitting in front of me is the student who received the highest grade ever on the big comprehensive final exam, the one they have been giving for decades. The highest." Mrs. Sanderson said her essay was the best she has ever read. Bethany was too humble to say anything, and she didn't want me to say anything, but this was too great an accomplishment. Their mother rose and walked around the table, followed shortly by their father. "Stand up," her mother said. "Yeah, get on up," her father added. Her mother opened her arms wide. "Now stand up. Get up. Get up before I pull you out of your chair," her father said, wearing a broad smile. Bethany reluctantly stood. "Naomi got one of the highest scores, too," Bethany said. "I did great, but you were awesome, best ever." Rita walked over to Bethany. "Give us a hug, my little genius. Guess you're not little anymore." For the next 3 minutes, everyone gushed about everything Bethany had accomplished. Bethany repeated, "Naomi did great on the test." "Yes," Naomi responded, "but nothing like you. I think I got a little luckier than you." "I don't think so." Mrs. Sanderson read one of her essays out loud. She said it was the best one she had ever had. "It was spectacular." "Please stop. It's embarrassing." "It might be embarrassing, but it will also be a challenge to live up to it in the future," Bethany's father said. "So, your embarrassment might go in the other direction." "Ethan, let her have her big day. Just stating the facts. Fame is fleeting." Bethany said, "It's just an 8th grade test." "It's still a great accomplishment," her mother said. "So enjoy it. Be proud of it." The rest of the evening centered around talking about the church and Pastor Habsburg's sermons. The family admired the ferocity of the sermons. Bethany said very little, but she had little to say about his sermons for some time now. At 9, she excused herself, saying she was tired and not feeling well. "You've been saying that a lot lately," her mother said. "I am sorry. I think we need for you to see a doctor again." No, I'll be okay," her father said. "She's like her dad, probably pushing herself too hard. She just needs a little more rest." Bethany stood. "Good night. Love you all." She carried her family's good night and love you upstairs as baggage. Lying in bed waiting for sleep to end her anguish, Bethany agonized over her success. It was earned by denying the truth. The well-meaning praise settled in her as a moral failure, a sin, and a fall from grace. She had wanted to tell them the truth, but as sins sometimes do, the praise felt so warm, so comforting. She wanted that warm feeling while wishing it were not there. She wanted it to stop, but also to continue. She had always wanted her family to feel proud of her, and she had always been driven toward it. She had succeeded year after year, and they had loved her more with each success. As Bethany saw it, success in school and church meant love. Honor and compassion were good, but they did not equate to love. Scene 7. Award? No thanks. Preceding the district's awards ceremony, which started at 8, was Mrs. Sanderson's open house. The students' dioramas of important events were on display at the back of the room. 4 of the 6 portrayed famous battles, 1 of liberation, 2 defending against an incursion, and 1 a battle expanding the Holy Bastion territory, which was Naomi and her partners. Hovering above that battle, pointing the way, floated God on a clear plastic straw. Bethany's diorama displayed Jesus comforting a wounded soldier after a battle. A small flap that lifted to display a hole was at the back right corner near the edge. No one appeared to notice it. Her partners didn't know why Bethany had insisted on it. Parents only briefly stopped. No one lifted the flap. Some thought it had something to do with resurrection. As the parents examined the dioramas, no one spent more than a few seconds at Bethany's. Her partners, Phoebe and Kate, sneered at her with each glancing, unenthusiastic observation. After a hug for Naomi, Bethany's mother returned to her. "Well, I knew you would make something like this. It's so like you, warm, kind, and thoughtful. You have a bit of Jesus in you. I just love it." Turning her head to the side, she whispered, "It's the best one here, my very favorite. Can I have it?" "Yes. I love you, Mom." "I love you too, sweetheart." They shared a prolonged hug. Mrs. Sanderson announced, "If you can tear yourself away from the wonderful projects, it's time for the awards assembly." It was a short trip to the auditorium. It was packed with yakking families, sharing their pride or silently seething with their disappointment. Last on the agenda were 8th grade honors. Naomi received an award for the Science of Creationism Student of the Year. Bethany's name went unmentioned, even for the History Award, which went to Elizabeth. Naomi looked at Bethany with surprise. Bethany shrugged. After a 1-minute pause, Principal Ramy stepped to the lectern. With a wave of his hand, he said, "Pastor Habsburg, the floor is yours." Habsburg walked solemnly to the lectern. Bethany: "Would you please come to the stage?" Wide-eyed, she didn't move. She didn't want to walk down the aisle. She felt that she had been betraying her family and her religion. Each look spoke to her hypocrisy. Her gut was tightening as she walked forward. "Stand right here," Pastor Habsburg said. Rarely has a student been complimented so often by all her teachers. Rarely has a student had such profound belief that it has inspired so many others like her. Bethany's head dropped. Rarely have I seen someone so humble. Noting Bethany's eyes shy away, he said, "I've embarrassed her enough." Habsburg walked to the table next to the lectern, picked up the award, and turned to Bethany. "Bethany, I am truly pleased to honor you with the Gabriel Evangelical Christian Student of the Year Award for the 8th grade." The award was a 9 by 9-inch plaque. Her parents rose with pride. Naomi applauded vigorously as she rose. To Bethany, the loud applause felt like 100 tiny cuts. She accepted it with a compulsory smile and began to cry for the betrayal no one else knew. Pastor Habsburg touched her shoulder. "See, this is true humility." Bethany hurried from the stage, holding the plaque limply by 2 fingers and a thumb. She was intent on going out the door and tossing Gabriel into the bushes when Naomi stepped in front of her, gave her a crushing hug, and pulled her to her seat. She received gentle hugs from her mother and father. When they sat, Naomi, holding out her hand, said, "Let me see it." Bethany was glad to be relieved of its weight. It was passed from Naomi to Mom, to Dad, and back to Bethany, who sat on her lap and moved it around, trying to get comfortable with it. At the end of the assembly, Bethany was congratulated by teachers, administrators, friends, and even prodded by their parents, grudgingly by a few rivals. She found it a struggle to look any of them in the eye. They considered it humility. It was guilt. Her parents prolonged the torture by soaking up compliments. She wanted to feel the torturous guilt deeply. But even more, she wanted to be home in her bed with her emotions spilling from her eyes, purging her agony. Scene 8. Child in the cabinet. Intervening century and a half have decimated what was left of Jenkins Corners. Roots would have pierced the buildings, splitting boards, opening paths for creatures to feed on the rot. Thickets would have attacked, crushing and burying structures. But she hoped there would be something discernible left. She rose 2 hours earlier than usual and left a note for Rita. "I will be later than usual. Tell Mom, Dad, and Naomi not to worry. I'll be fine." As she passed the garden tool shack, she stepped in and grabbed a short-handled shovel from the bottom of a pile of old tools in the corner. She strapped it across the top of the backpack and headed out, determined to find something even if she had to dig, something she had never done. On her well-worn trail, Bethany headed up a slight incline, passing the hatch without a thought of searching the archives. She had exhausted its knowledge. As she slowly walked uphill, she kicked aside low-lying branches and creeping vines. She stopped after 20 minutes. "This is going to take forever. I need a more expansive view." Tree. She looked for a climbable tree. An oak tree provided several limbs spaced close enough for her to work her way up the tree. She put her gloves on and set her backpack at the base of the tree. After several feet, she felt the leaves pricking through her long-sleeved shirt. "I should have worn my jacket." The hot weather had discouraged wearing it. She worked her way up, looking for a break in the foliage where she could see through the branches. She found it, and, scanning quickly, she noticed only small gradations in the terrain. She recalled the photos of the town on the wall and in the newspaper and slowed her scan appreciably. Only the photo showing the main street gave any indication where the buildings had been, and she didn't know from which angle it had been taken. There was a long, wide strip which was flatter than the surrounding area. As she looked into the distance, the trees lent an impression of a canyon of trees with thick walls of older, taller trees and sparser groups of trees down the middle of the canyon. It extended far beyond the town. Maybe that's the main road into the town. The road appeared to get steeper toward the end of what she thought might be the town. She counted what she believed to be 5 narrow side streets, or alleys. With those as an indicator, she looked to the left and right of the main road and saw raised areas halfway down the road. Some of the growth made sharp angles. Foundation of a building. She used a tree near the foundation to mark the location. She climbed down the tree, grabbed her backpack, and headed to the spot. From ground level, the area was not defined as clearly as it had been from the tree. After kicking under several feet of creepers, her foot came to a sudden stop. She pushed and pulled the vines apart. Concrete. Unstrapping the shovel, she probed, following the foundation, skipping over areas where sections of the foundation had crumbled into small pieces. What dominated the surface of the most protected sections of the concrete was a mottled black substance. Thinking it to be dead moss, she took off a glove and rubbed her hand along it. She expected it to crumble. It didn't. It wasn't moss. She rubbed a bit of it on the back of her hand. Soot. She explored more thoroughly inside the foundation. As she dug, she uncovered pieces of burnt wood, some small, some as large as a feet. She set them on top of the plants, stood in the center of the foundation, and turned 360 degrees. This appeared to be a small building. She continued to push vines and bushes to the side. She dug shallowly when an area looked interesting. She uncovered fragments of what appeared to be ceramics and pottery. She found sections of pipe and pots and pans under several layers of earth. Yeah, this was someone's home. What she found strange was what she didn't find. Sinks, tubs, plumbing, toilets, anything valuable or usable. She slipped on her backpack and, dragging the shovel, walked down what she believed to be the center of the road. She weaved in and out of the lots where buildings had been. Missing again from each were sinks, toilets, plumbing, all the normal items a building would have. Clearly, scavengers had been through the town not too long after Jenkins Corner's cataclysmic fire, of which many rumors have been fostered in stories over the years. The acceptable tale told to children and adults. A gas line had set the town ablaze. Since they had no fire department, the blaze went unchecked and Jenkins Corners burned to the ground. She encountered the first side street shortly after entering the downtown area, which was about a mile long. She passed 5 side streets and walked a short way down each one. Whatever structures had been there had been nearly or completely flattened. If the houses had chimneys, not even remnants remained. One conclusion she quickly confirmed: a devastating fire had razed the town to the ground. Down one side street, she spotted 8 feet of vines sticking straight up. It was unusually wide at the base, narrowing rapidly and finishing very narrow at the tip, almost coming to a sharp point. 3 steps later, she stopped. Curious shape for a tree. With eyes fixed on the vaguely defined object, she plodded to it. At the base, the vines appeared to have grown over a pile of debris and had wound around up the object. She took off her backpack, took the shovel, and separated the vines. The 8-foot-tall vine-covered tree turned out to be a 4 by 4 post. As she dug deeper through the pile, she found fragments of a burnt, broken flat panel. This must have been part of a door, maybe a cabinet door. The panel was overgrown with vines. She retrieved her father's small circular saw and cut the vines. She pulled a fragment of the door up. It had a hinge. A foot to the right was a burnt fragment. Again, she cut the vines away. As she pulled another piece away, the top weave of vines collapsed with vines still attached. She cut the far ends of the vines and pulled on them. They had wrapped around something that moved slightly. She cut more away. Underneath a section of vines was a 10-inch strip that looked like melted plastic. She pulled again, and a 2-foot section moved half a foot. She grabbed a shovel and chopped down through more vines. She wedged the shovel behind a clump of vines and pulled toward her. The sudden release of the vines sent her stumbling backward, landing on her backside with the edge of the mass of vines falling on her right foot. When she raised her head, the mass of vines was a few feet away. She grabbed the edge and twisted it off her foot. A short distance away, still attached to the mass of vines, was a dark root about a foot long. She now knew why she had to struggle. even though she had cut away much of the vines and roots. A root had caught the toe of her shoe. She bent, grabbed it, and yanked it up. Flying up in front of her was a fan of smaller roots attached to the end of the large root. She grabbed it to toss it out of her way. "Oh God, a hand!" she shouted as she dropped it and scrambled backwards. Attached to the hand was the forearm, and the upper arm bent at the elbow. Vines had grown between and around the bones of forearm and hand. Roots had weaved through the hand, separating the metacarpals and the bones of the wrist. "It's too small to be an adult's arm." For several minutes, she could do nothing, think nothing, feel nothing except horror. The revulsion of what lay before her drove into her heart. Had someone really done this? Was there a child buried inside a cocoon of wood, roots, and vines? Enraged, she crawled back to the cabinet. She sawed and chopped feverishly, tearing away roots and vines. It was still too dark to confirm what she knew. She got her flashlight out of the backpack, went back and flooded the darkness. Curled up inside the cabinet was the scorched body of child. She pushed herself away, pulled her knees up, and dropped her head to her knees. Her wrenching sobs spoke of her grief. She had known what to expect, but it didn't lessen the shock and devastation. For too long, the vision remained. Then she wondered if the child had hidden in a cabinet, or had the child been hidden there for protection. Horrible thoughts wove through her mind. Has the child been alive at the time? She didn't want to know, but she couldn't stop imagining the horror of the flames eating their way through the doors and the panic of the child pushing back against the wall and the terror-filled eyes darting around, searching for an escape. She wanted to rid the visions from her mind, but they would not leave her alone. She feared they never would. Tears continued to stream down her cheeks while her mind raged. Was this child caught in the destruction of Jenkins Corners? The story that grew with expanding causes each decade? Had the devastation been a tragic accident or deliberate? She alternately sobbed and stormed for nearly 20 minutes. It has to be an accident, an act of God. No one would do this. With the lies she had learned about the great demonstration and the great conflagration circling in her mind, she could not convince herself that it was a tragic accident. She carefully set the arm next to the body and replaced the wood, roots, and vines she had torn away. She had to know if this was just one unlucky child. Where were the parents? She had to believe they had died trying to save the child. So, the parents were taken away and buried without their child because the child had never been found. It was the story she needed to believe. She changed into clean clothes she had packed to avoid answering questions about how she got so dirty. She shoved her dirty clothes to the bottom of the backpack. "I'll come back for you. I'll find a peaceful, beautiful place to put you and spend some time with you. You will not be forgotten ever again. We can visit from time to time. You will be loved." It helped dry her tears and subdue her rage. "I can't come back tomorrow. Gotta praise the Lord and pretend to be faithful." She froze. Her automatic, inherited reaction had come quickly. What she had just said was sacrilege, unforgivable. She detested herself. She was no longer sure how completely she believed. She was a hypocrite. She was a sinner for deceiving the church, which had been the center of her world and had given her so much support and joy. Worse yet, she was deceiving her parents and her sister and best friend, Naomi. She had continued to be accepted because she had banked a residual of trust over the years. She could use it to come home. What's happening to me? Her belief in her religion had been tarnished, and she couldn't undo it, but she had to try. That could wait. First, she had a promise to a child to keep. "I'll only come back for the child, but that's all. And then I'll only come again to keep my promise to the child. Yes, and then I'll pray tomorrow in the church for strength and guidance." She began the long trek home, chastising herself with every step. The church had meant everything to her. It had kept her strong, compassionate, and loving. She had true, unwavering faith until now. As she was about to open the back door to the house, she knew she was going to cry. She couldn't let her family see. She hurried through the door and up the stairs. "Bethany, Bethany, there's someone here to see you." She didn't stop. She rushed in her room, locked the door, stripped, went into the shower, and let herself cry. She took a long, tearful shower, dried, dressed, calmed herself, and went downstairs. Her mother was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. "Bethany, didn't you hear me?" "No, I came up and knocked. I was in the shower. Come into the living room. There's someone here to see you." Bethany walked into the room. A man was sitting on the couch with his back to her. He stood and turned to her. She came to a sudden stop. "Pastor Habsburg wants to talk to you. He has a wonderful surprise." "Have a seat over here next to me," he said. Exuding piety, Habsburg smiled. Bethany sat several feet away from him. "Bethany, for someone so young, you are one of the most amazing young Christians I've ever known. Not next Sunday, but the Sunday after next Sunday. I would like you to say a few words from the pulpit to the young people about the power of faith." Terror struck Bethany. Her mind felt as if it were floating. She neared the threshold of panic before pulling herself back. Bethany eked out, That was all. I know it's unexpected, maybe even overwhelming." Her mother quickly added, "And such a great honor." She looked pleadingly at Bethany. "Isn't it, dear?" Her mother's likely disappointment was churning Bethany's emotions. She needs to find a way out. The necessity to lie was taking hold. Her mother pushed. "Isn't it, dear?" She couldn't lie. She had to answer yes. She quietly did. "If you need help, let me know," Pastor Habsburg offered. "Oh, she'll be fine. She's a very smart young lady," her mother said. "We all know that." Until now, Bethany had always been seen as a girl, not a young lady. But she didn't want to be her mother's young lady. Her mother escorted Pastor Habsburg to the door. Bethany was still on the couch, staring straight ahead with her fingers entwined in her lap. As her mother walked into the room, her immediate comment was, "Your father will be so proud." She saw Bethany's distress and sat next to her. "I know this is very unexpected, but just think of the influence you can have on young people." "Okay, I thought you would be excited." Bethany choked out, "I am. But you're scared, right?" "That's understandable." Bethany was scared, but not just in the way her mother thought. Her fear was also hypocrisy. "I'll help, and so will your father. We can practice and give you suggestions. Your father has spoken often in front groups. He's quite good. That's okay. I could do it on my own. I want to be my words. I'm going up to my room and start working on it." The task was now in front of her, but haunting the back of her mind was the child, the lies, and the truth about Jenkins Corners. Her two worlds were colliding. She felt her honor was on the line, and, even now, after much professed certainty, she wasn't certain on which side it would fall. The image of the child flashed forward. Instantly, she was outraged by it. She knew she would return to Jenkins Corners to tend to the child, but she also knew she might be digging for a resolution. The shame of her hypocrisy demanded it. She now knew her real thoughts, yet she could not reveal them. Scene 9. Burying the child. Walking into the church, two emotions clashed. Bethany's eyes immediately went to the pulpit, the place of terror, the site of the clash between betrayal and dishonor. Today, she felt relief. The day of dread wasn't today. There would be time for agony to build again. When Pastor Habsburg entered, Bethany worried he might be looking for her. He nodded at her. A chill rose up her spine. "Maybe I could be sick next Sunday." "No, it would just be postponed. Besides, it's just a few words. Do it and be done with it." As Habsburg approached the pulpit, Bethany's father leaned toward Bethany and quietly said, "How is the work on your little speech going?" "Fina, I'm so proud of you. You'll do great. I was scared the first time I had to speak in front of a group. It's a natural feeling. People say that fear of speaking in public is greater than the fear of death." Bethany thought she'd rather die. "Ethan, that isn't helping. But it's true. Ethan, okay. You'll hear no more from me on the subject." Naomi set her hand on Bethany's forearm. "You'll do great. You can practice on me." "Thanks." Bethany couldn't take her eyes off the pulpit. Next week she would walk up the steps, tighten the noose, and wait for the pastor to unlatch the trapdoor. When Habsburg said, "Amen," Bethany realized she hadn't heard a word. She let the rest of the pro forma service casually wash over her. She had nothing to say about the sermon, the family's usual conversation as they drove home. Her family chalked it up to worry over her future few words. Her mind, however, was on a trapped child and searching for a way out. Bethany continued to punish herself until the barrage of misgivings put her to sleep. When she woke Monday morning, she expected, by some miracle of sleep, that her subconscious would have revealed a resolution. She was disappointed. There was not even a glimmer. So, the battle still raged as she prepared for her hike, adding a twin sheet to her backpack. Her feet stuttered down the stairs, the child flooding her thoughts. "Bethany, it isn't Saturday," Rita said. Still wavering at a final decision, she hedged her reply. "I know. I might hike every day, or as often as I can stand it, or not at all. Hiking is good for you, but too much might just be boring. I don't just hike. I sometimes write and visit with the creatures. If I do it often enough, maybe they'll stop running away. Maybe. I hope so. It would be wonderful to have them trust me, kind of like the paintings of Jesus surrounded by forest animals. I wish you luck." She went back to preparing breakfast for the family. "Let me fix you something to take with you. It will only take a minute." She threw 2 apples, a pear and a peach, along with rolls and cookies, into a bag. Moving aside the clean clothes, basically a t-shirt and jeans similar to the one she was wearing, Bethany rearranged the rest of the backpack and carefully placed the food in a side pouch. "By the way, congratulations on being chosen to give a sermon." "It's not a sermon. It's just a few lines," she replied more sharply than intended. "Still, that's quite an honor." "Thank you." She hoped that the congratulations would soon end, but people just kept resurrecting her conflict. By the time she went from the back door across the yard and shut the gate behind her, her mind was on the child. As she entered the outskirts of Jenkins Corners, she hoped that seeing the child for the second time would not have the horrifying impact as it had initially. Walking down the main road had a familiar feeling this time. The grotesque nature of the crumbling structures made remembering the terrain easier. To the right, behind a bush that had sprouted in a crack, shattering a small slab of concrete, a rectangular 2-section sink flashed into view, vines snaking through a split, growing up through the drains, spreading and spilling over the edge. She welcomed the distraction. It delayed seeing the child. Arriving at the street, she paused and steadied herself. She saw the 8-feet-tall swirl of vines pointing the way. She hardened herself and trekked to the child. She moved the debris away. She took the lamp from the backpack, dug to the bottom of it, and pulled out the bed sheet. She placed it on the ground and set the lamp inside the cabinet. The light hit the child. She could clearly see the arm and behind it the scorched child. Distressed, she cringed at the revolting sight. Nonetheless, she pulled the arm out and put it on the sheet. The lamp revealed a raft of vines wrapped around the child. The vines had choked the head off the neck. She retrieved the saw, and without crawling further into the cabinet, she cut as many vines as she could reach. After she had cut several, she pulled on the shoulders of the child. The child refused to move. She cut more vines and pulled again. The child's shoulders moved slightly. She closed her eyes and pulled again. The child moved a foot. When she opened her eyes, she was holding half the child. She let the child fall. She stiffened into standing, then walked away to steady her resolve. When she returned, she placed the top half of the child on the sheet. Cringing, she crawled into the cabinet and removed the lower half. She sat on the sheet and stood. She donned her backpack, pulled the 4 corners of the sheet together, and dragging the child and the shovel searched for a peaceful, pleasant place to bury the child. In the distance, she saw the beginnings of what might be a small meadow. She continued to drag the child into the meadow with an abundance of flowers. A small raised area covered with flowers caught her attention. "How about there? Would you like that spot?" There's a large cluster of pretty yellow flowers mixed with some small white ones. She continued to it, set the child just outside the cluster of flowers, and cleared a space in the center. She dug down as far as she could until roots stopped her. She placed the tightly wrapped child in the hole. "I'm sorry your life ended so horribly. I never knew you, but I know you were loved. If there is a heaven, you'll be in it. Of course there's a heaven," she reprimanded herself. "Of course there is. Yes, of course." With the self-reprimand fresh in her mind, she took no chances and prayed for the child's salvation because she didn't know if the child had been baptized or born again. Bethany walked away with the sight of the child still boring into her heart, making Jenkins Corners merely inconsequential rubble. Scene 10. Born Again Bible Camp. Bethany's mind was on the child, and although she tried to disgorge her thoughts from the secrets of Jenkins Corners, they hung on like the vines wrapped around the child. For 2 days she resisted, but when the vision of the child struck her the third day, she had to keep her promise. The child would not be forgotten. When she went downstairs, Rita, as usual, had her food ready. As she took the bag from Rita, Rita said, "It's going to rain tomorrow and possibly the next day, so I assume you will not be hiking." "How much?" "I don't know, but no canoe will be needed." "Okay, bye." Bethany would have smiled, but with the child on her mind, she could find none. "Bye." During the hike, she recited as many prayers as she could remember. Then she talked to the Lord as she had done many times before. But he wasn't answering with peace of mind and comfort, as he had done so many times. She didn't feel him. "He's left me. I've sinned, and he has left me. I'm alone." Pastor Hapberg's sermon. He had delivered a warning threat. Christ could not be seen as a savior from sin and God's wrath. God sees our sins, and he does judge us. Christ could not rescue us from facing our sins. He was not to be used to make us feel good, to make us feel that God will not judge us. He will judge us, and Christ is not here to prevent it. If we sinned, we had to feel God's wrath. Christ was not on earth to protect us from God's wrath. God will punish us. We sin. We are punished. Bethany had heard that often over her years in the church. When she was young, they were just words. As she matured, individual words had meanings she understood, and she believed the truth of them because that was the belief of the evangelical Christian God, her God. She certainly had sinned, and she was certainly being tormented. God was punishing her. "I deserve it. I should never have questioned Mrs. Sanderson's history lessons or Haig's The Struggle. I should never have searched for the truth about the great demonstration and the great conflagration." She walked on, passing the archives, which she looked at it with hate and longing. Hoping her contrition had calmed God's wrath, again she prayed. Again, there was no comfort. She knew why. The doubt was still deep in her. She could not ignore the knowledge. She could not wash it from her mind. It was lodged deeply and could not be denied, no matter how much she prayed, and no matter how much she tormented herself in the name of God. She felt no return to God's good graces. Bethany's mind turned to the place where she felt worthy, the child. Her belief grew as she moved steadily toward it. The flowers around the grave were still bright, and it lightened her torment. The burial had been an act of compassion. Nothing could diminish that, not even the wrath of God. Bethany sat in the middle of the flowers, reached her hand down, placing it over the child's head. She tried to imagine the child playing with other children. All she saw was a burnt corpse. She cried for the unimaginable terror and torture the child had endured. No one deserved that horror, especially not a child. Her torment faded. At the child's grave, God's wrath had no power over her. Her compassion was proof against it. She wished the child peace, gave her love, and rose. The child had become more than a promise, more than pity. Still emotional, Bethany delayed her walk home by wandering through the woods. She didn't pray, nor ask for forgiveness nor guidance. She listened to the birds and the scratching of creatures in the undergrowth and let herself drift into the sounds. Night was rushing in, with dark clouds making it even darker. It was time to return home. Hoping to expunge the anguish of her dilemma, she slowed her pace. Instead, she had more time to agonize and add a new dread, the feeling that the specter of God's wrath and his purveyors would be waiting when she entered the house. In the woods at the grave, she felt protected. When she stepped into the house, she would be vulnerable. She didn't know what would happen and how it would affect her. At the back gate, she paused to prepare herself for the obligatory questions about her hike. Would she be ready? Possibly. She was learning to obfuscate and lie. Still, it would create a knot in her stomach, but she had no other choice. Telling the family, or anyone, her new truth would mean, depending on her age and the severity of her offense, either rehabilitation camp or born-again Bible camp. where she would be bludgeoned with passages from the Bible while living in a harsh environment enduring chain gang labor. She knew she would be broken, and she feared little of herself would be left. Others had come back with blank smiles and formulated feelings, and a basket of biblical quotes which they would pour out at every opportunity. When she closed the gate behind her, the first drops of rain sounded on the roof of the shed. By the time she reached the back door, the drops were pattering the grass. Bethany navigated the questions they asked, which, luckily, were few. For the rest of the day, she watched the rain make rivers of mutating patterns on the window, mindlessly drifting into them. They were soothing. She remained undisturbed by the family for the rest of the day. It rained for the next 2 days. Accompanying the rain was Pastor Habsburg's imposed request, a few words to the young people about the power of faith. Bethany started to work on it several times on the first full day of rain. There was too much conflict circling in her mind. She turned to the Bible for inspiration and to pull her faith back to her. She only needed a few lines, but each time she wrote them, they troubled her. The rain stopped Saturday evening. By 2 a.m., the few words had become many words, but none that she would use. They were all some version of lies and manipulation. Scene 11. What is true? Bethany looked out on the congregation, relieved more than anything else. As she stepped down from the podium, she was greeted by Pastor Habsburg's nod and a thank you, but coupled with an odd expression. When Bethany turned to the pews where her family was sitting, she gazed at them for a moment, then turned away. 20 feet away was the door from which Pastor Habsburg had entered every Sunday. Without hesitation, she walked through the door into the antechamber to his office. She sat on one of 2 benches in the chamber and waited. She couldn't remember much of what she had said. She could remember saying the word faith several times and choice and decision. She also remembered saying flip a coin and let fate decide. The rest was a jumble of words and fragments of thoughts. She fretted with her hands on her thighs. She moved them down and back up repeatedly, as if she were ironing the dress. For an hour, she sat with only Habsburg's odd expression and bland thank you as a clue to his thoughts. If she could just remember more of what she had said, she might know if she was in danger. However, if she were in trouble, she figured it shouldn't be too bad. She sensed the end of the service, followed by the pounding of her heart. Pastor Habsburg will be shaking hands and blessing people. On the commotion, she might be able to sneak out. She rose, went to the door, and peeked. People were milling around in small groups engaged in small talk, most of it religious, and some of that about salvation. Bethany stayed close to the east wall of the church and behind the pillars. Bethany. She turned. Mom, that was an interesting, I guess you could call it talk. Bethany remained silent. Your father, Naomi, and I aren't sure what you were getting at. I did my best. She felt the tears creeping forward. She pulled them back. I wish you would let your father and me help you. To Bethany, that was an invasion of her independence. I wanted it to be my ideas, my words, my thoughts. That's very commendable, but you are still very young and inexperienced. There is still much for you to learn, and your father and I would like to help. You have to remember that what you do reflects on the entire family. What I do that was so bad. We'll let Pastor Habsburg talk to you. It's better if it comes from Pastor. Bethany caught her father's eyes focusing beyond her as Habsburg approached. Let's go into my office so we can talk. Habsburg said, walking past them. The family followed. After a few steps, Habsburg turned. It would be better if it were just Bethany and me. The family might alter my conversation with Bethany by being too emotionally invested. Bethany's father started. Her mother's hand fell on top of his, stopping the response. You can wait for us here, Habsburg said, nodding at the nearby pew. Apprehensive, Bethany walked a step behind Habsburg. They passed through the antechamber room. Habsburg unlocked his office. The door opened onto an imposing 20-foot square room decorated in dark oak furniture, plush brown leather chairs, and a round table with 4 chairs. Pictures of religious scenes decorated the walls. Most were battle scenes. A large painting of Christ hung on the wall behind Habsburg's desk. 8 feet to the side of his desk was a stand with a large, open Bible. He pointed to a chair in front of his desk. Have a seat. He sat next to her and turned sideways on the chair. Bethany. Yes, sir. I think your talk was a little confusing to people, especially to young people. It was supposed to be about the power of faith. I thought it was. In a way it was, but I think it missed the point about faith. I mentioned faith several times. Yes, but you didn't mention faith in the Bible, faith in the Lord, or faith in God. That's where the power of faith lies. That's the faith we can trust to be true. That's the faith on which we can rely to guide us. What about faith in myself? If it is born from the Bible, Christ, and God, that is fine, but we must all remember that we are all sinners and our faith can weaken. So, we must always look to the Lord through our prayer and rely on the Church's views of Scripture. Hundreds of years of thought from the evangelical Christian movement has gone into understanding the Word of God. That's why our faith should rely on it. He looked solemnly into her eyes. Do you understand? To bring an end to the Inquisition, she replied, Yes, sir. Good. You're a good kid. I just wanted to make sure you understood what the power of faith really means. I do, sir. Tell your parents we should talk soon. Bethany read that as a threat. When she closed the antechamber door, her parents and Naomi were rising from the first pew. Her mother stepped quickly toward her. So what did he say to you? Was it good or bad? Her father asked. Naomi offered an expression of concern as she reached and took her hand. I don't think it was too bad. Too bad? What do you mean by that? Ethan, let her explain. Ethan frowned, but clamped his jaw. Basically, he had only one concern. Faith. Bewildered, her mother asked. He was concerned about your faith? Maybe I should have a little talk with a good pastor about the power of faith. Ethan, calm down. Let Bethany explain. Let's talk in the car, Bethany said. That's a good idea, her mother replied. With Naomi still holding Bethany's hand, the family went to the car. The driver was leaning against the front fender. He quickly opened the back doors, waited for the family to enter, and then closed them. Bethany's father firmly asked, Now about this faith issue. What did he say? Bethany lowered her eyes. Ethan, don't be so harsh. I'm not angry at Bethany. I want to know why Habsburg is questioning her faith. I just need an explanation. Bethany's mother turned to her. Bethany? The few words Bethany uttered were inaudible. Dear, raise your head and speak up. You're not in any trouble. Naomi squeezed Bethany's hand and then wrapped her arm around her shoulders. He said I didn't talk about the power of faith in God, the Bible, and the Lord when making decisions. Her mother said, I remember you talking about the power of faith in making decisions. I did, but I think I talked about people's power of faith in themselves to make decisions, or having faith in others to make decisions for you, and having faith and trusting the power of other people's faith. Should we rely on other people's decision or just battle through it ourselves? Nodding knowingly, her father said, I see what he's saying. You should rely on the power of our faith in God, the Bible, and the Lord. Well, he's right. They're our guide. We put our faith in them to light the way. They are infallible. We are fallible. When we rely on the power of faith in them, we make the right decision, the decision they need us to make. When we rely on ourselves, we show our arrogance. Our counsel with God is a special blessing. He shows us the way and keeps us on the right path. On our own, we are nothing but flesh and bones. He is the Spirit and the light. As Naomi and her mother were shaking their heads in agreement, he looked intently at Bethany. Do you understand? Bethany just wanted the assault to stop. She was not used to this much harshness from her parents or a reprimand from a pastor. She was sure they saw her faith as weak and that she was failing as a daughter. She loved them, and she had disappointed them. The agony settled hard in her as she followed them into the house. Bethany desperately tried to hold her tears back, but they filled her eyes. The hug from her father, mother, and then Naomi made it worse. Still, she held the bulk of the tears back until she closed and locked the door to her room behind her. As the tears flowed, she buried her face deep into her pillow, muffling her torment. A knock on the door, and her mother's soft voice lifted her face from the pillow. Are you okay, Bethany? She sniffled and responded through a hoarse throat. Yes. I just need some time to be alone. Sweetheart, remember we all love you and want the best for you. This would be a good time to read the Bible and look to the power of faith in the Lord. Fear of losing her family meant there was only one answer she could give. I will. She slid her Bible off her nightstand, opened the drawer, removed her Bible index, and rolled onto her back. She propped herself on her pillows, and using the index, began to search. An hour later, she had found almost 34 passages. Among them were Ephesians 2 verses 8 to 9. For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing. It is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. Hebrews 11 verse 6. And without faith, it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. Romans 5 verse 1. Therefore, since we have been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Romans 4 verses 20 to 21. No unbelief made him waver concerning the promise of God, but he grew strong in his faith as he gave glory to God, fully convinced that God was able to do what he had promised. None of them dealt with her dilemma. Accepting the evangelical Christian church history as presented in Anton Haig's The Struggle, and accepting the church's version of the Great Demonstration and the Great Conflagration of Landers Crossroads. Or continuing her quest to find out if the church had lied about or manipulated the truth about what happened at Landers Crossroads. If they had lied, about what else had they lied? How much of the evangelical Christian church religion was true? Could she have faith in its veracity? Bethany was staring into the heart of who she would become, and she didn't know who would be staring back. Scene 12. A name for the child. Bethany could hear her family pulling their chairs up to the dinner table as she descended the stairs. Before her foot left the final step, she knew she could not be without their love. But, try as she might, she didn't trust the church. How much truth had slid by over the years because it was convenient? How much had been buried along with Jenkins Corners? She had learned too much. The archives had taught her too much. She couldn't shake the feeling that the church had manipulated the truth. So, in turn, she didn't know how much of the evangelical Christian religion was based on fabrication, manipulation, invention, and restructuring history. However, if she needed to accept the church to secure her family's love, she would do it, regardless of the necessity to fake her belief and faith to dishonor herself. The agony she felt now, she knew she would feel for a long time. By the time they finished the dinner prayer, Bethany's decision had been etched deeply. Jenkins Corners and the archives had to be ignored. It was the condition of her return to a loving family. Her condition, not theirs. However, what she had promised the child she would keep. She needed it to have some faith in her remaining integrity. As had become a pattern the past months, after the family visited in the living room, Bethany excused herself and went to her room. She lay in bed, traumatized by the conflict, while confronting the self-debasement of her honor, her belief in herself. Scene 13. 3 years later, Bethany carried 2 vows on her Saturday morning trip to see the child. A vow to drop her quest to learn the truth about Jenkins Corners and church's involvement, and a vow never to forget the child. She hiked past the archives and up the main road. Each time her mind turned to the archives and the town, she recited a passage from the Bible. She had recited a myriad of passages by the time she reached the child's grave. Well, here I am again. I talk to you, but I don't know who you are. I don't want to call you child. That's too impersonal, but I feel as if I know you. That's ridiculous. I know nothing about what you liked to do or didn't like to do. I don't know if you had good parents or if you liked them. Were they kind? Did you get into trouble? Did you play with friends in your backyard? In the front yard? In the street? Did you come here to play or pick flowers or watch the birds? Bethany walked through the meadow, gathering stones. She placed them next to the grave and gathered several more handfuls. With them, she very carefully encircled the edge of the grave, placing a 4-inch oval stone and at her head. She took a towel from her backpack, placed it on a slope next to the grave, and sat. If you don't mind, since I don't know your name, I'm going to give you one. I'm sure you're a girl. I won't make you be a boy. They're cruel. I don't like to be around them. Girls are nice. Not all, but most. So, let me see, I'll call you Wendy. I hope that's okay. Bethany rose, picked up the towel, turned, stopped, turned back. Wendy, I used to be so happy all the time. Now, I'm rarely happy. I don't feel about the church like I used to. I try, but now I'm always questioning the sermons and the teachings. I never tell anyone because I'll get in trouble. I don't know what my parents will think. I love them, and I don't want to lose them. Then there's Naomi. I used to talk to her about everything. Now, I think I can only talk to her if it's about things I know she believes in. I can't talk to her about the things about the church that bother me. I can't tell her about the archives. She believes so deeply in the church, and I don't want to destroy that for her. She thinks the church is perfect, that it's the true word of God. I don't know if it is, but Bethany, stop thinking about it. Wendy, you would probably have done anything to be with your parents. Anything, right? All I have to do is stop looking for answers about this place. Even if I find out what happened, what difference would it make? No one will believe me. Nothing would change, except I'd be kicked out of the church and my home. I'd have no one, and it would hurt the people I love. I would be causing them agony, all because I have to know the truth if it is the truth. But I know what I learned wasn't the truth. Stop it, Bethany. You need to let go. So why can't I? Pastor Habsburg would say, it's because I'm putting myself before God's plan, that whatever is happening, it is His will, and we just don't understand it, that we can't understand it. I need to have faith in the power of God, to believe in the power of the Lord and the word of the Bible and my church. She clamped her jaw, determined to overcome her reluctance. I need to be born again. Her jaw tightened as she promised to accept the truth of the evangelical Christian doctrine, to have faith in God, the Bible, the Lord, and her church. Her jaw bulged, as if she were forcing her promise down to a place where it would not rise again. I need to be humble enough to accept that I don't really know. There are people who are much wiser. I was arrogant to think that I had the real answer. Once again, she had convinced herself to quit the quest. She was certain that she would. She kissed 3 fingers, touched the stone where Wendy's head would be. She stood and headed to the town, which held answers that she could never seek. Her head uncontrollably turned to the ruins where she had discovered Wendy. She shivered. She walked through the forest-obscured, burnt ruins of the town, wondering how the people felt about losing everything. She passed the archives that she would never enter again. The town's history forced its way into her mind. It's only a thought, not an act. It will take time, but I will be able to do it. I will for my family. As she hiked away, she shook away the archive's memories. She felt uncomfortably relieved. She could now begin the deception of her family, the church, and most of all, herself. When she arrived at the back gate, she thought about the next time she would go to see Wendy. I'll take a different route. Go around the town so I don't see it. It's going to take time. Be patient. She entered the house with a determined smile. The family was sitting down for breakfast. She surprised them with the hugs. What was that for? Her mother asked. I wanted to let you know that I love you, and that I'm sorry if I've been acting weird lately. We love you too, came in spurts. Her father and Naomi added smiles to their love. Bethany was relieved. It was almost genuine. Scene 14. The promise. The battle to keep her promise ran the range from difficult to effortless, but with small steps, the archives in the town were pushed further to the back of her mind. She kept her vow to Wendy, who became a kind of therapist. She placed her troubles on the grave and tried to leave them there. Bethany imagined that Wendy was an evangelical Christian, even to the point that, in her mind, she put her sitting next to her, as if she were real. Wendy argued wisely on behalf of the church, causing the archives and the town to fade from Bethany's mind. 3 years later, by the time Bethany's high school graduation approached, she felt she was back in the good graces of the church and the loving arms of her family. The graduation ceremonies of the 2 high schools would take place at the dedication of the new 15,000-seat megachurch.